Gunfire shattered the crystal chandelier above, raining a million diamonds of glass onto the blood-slicked marble floor. Amidst the screaming crowd and the choking scent of cordite, a heavy hand gripped Josephine's waist, pulling her into the suffocating shadows. "Follow my lead," he whispered, and her blood froze. Josephine Miller was a woman who believed in the absolute, undeniable truth of numbers. As a senior forensic accountant for Kensington and Lowe in downtown Manhattan, she operated in a world of black and white, debits and credits, assets and liabilities. Numbers did not lie. They did not have hidden agendas, and they certainly did not carry loaded weapons. But the numbers sitting on her mahogany desk on a rainy Tuesday evening were screaming a very dangerous story. She rubbed her tired eyes, staring at the financial reports of Rossi Global Logistics. On paper, it was one of the most successful maritime shipping and freight companies on the eastern seaboard. In reality, anyone who read the New York Times knew the Rossi family was the beating heart of the city's most formidable organized syndicate. Under the iron-fisted rule of Gabriel Rossi, the family had transitioned from old-school street thuggery into a highly structured paramilitary organization. Gabriel didn't employ capos and soldiers. He employed tactical directors, logistics coordinators, and ex-military personnel. The syndicate operated with the terrifying, silent precision of a private military contractor. Josephine had been assigned to perform a routine compliance audit, a necessity for Rossi Global to maintain its public trading facade. Her boss, a sweaty, anxious man named Harrison Ford, had explicitly told her to stamp the paperwork and move on. "Don't dig, Josie. Just skim the surface," he had warned her, his eyes darting nervously toward the door. But Josephine couldn't just skim. It wasn't in her nature. Tracing a discrepancy in the quarterly overseas shipping manifests, she found a ghost account. It wasn't a clumsy money laundering attempt. It was an intricate, brilliantly disguised routing system siphoning millions of dollars out of Rossi Global and into untraceable offshore holdings. But the strangest part was the direction of the flow. The money wasn't being hidden by the Rossi family, it was being stolen from them. Someone inside the organization, or someone very close to it, was bleeding Gabriel Rossi dry and using Josephine's own accounting firm to cover the tracks. A sharp knock on her office door shattered her concentration. She slammed the laptop shut just as the door swung open. Standing in the threshold was Dominic, Gabriel Rossi's right-hand man. He was built like a tank, wearing a tailored three-piece suit that failed to hide the tactical shoulder holster bulging slightly beneath his jacket. "Miss Miller," Dominic said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Mr. Rossi requests an update on the audit." "The audit is ongoing, Dominic," Josephine replied, trying to keep her voice steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "These things take time. I'm scheduled to present my preliminary findings at the end of the month. Plans have changed." Dominic stepped into the room, the sheer mass of him making the spacious office feel incredibly small. He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a thick, cream-colored envelope, placing it deliberately on her desk. "Mr. Rossi is hosting the annual Rossi Foundation Gala tomorrow evening at the Plaza. You will attend. You will bring your preliminary findings. He wishes to discuss them in person." Josephine stared at the gold-embossed invitation. A charity gala isn't exactly the appropriate venue for a financial review. "With all due respect, Miss Miller," Dominic said, his expression devoid of any warmth. "When Gabriel Rossi asks for a meeting, the venue is wherever he happens to be standing. A car will collect you at 8. He didn't wait for a reply. He simply turned and walked out, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and unspoken threats in his wake. Josephine opened her laptop again, her hands trembling slightly. She was holding a live grenade. If she told Gabriel Rossi he was being robbed, she risked walking into the crosshairs of whoever was doing the stealing. If she kept quiet, she became complicit in defrauding the most dangerous man in New York. She spent the next 24 hours compiling the data onto a heavily encrypted flash drive. She wore her anxiety like a second skin. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every black SUV that idled on her street, every click on her phone line, sent spikes of adrenaline through her veins. The following evening, as a sleek, bulletproof Maybach pulled up to her apartment building, Josephine took a deep breath. She had chosen a simple, floor-length emerald silk gown, elegant, understated, and easy to move in. She slipped the encrypted flash drive into her matching clutch. She was stepping out of her world of safe, predictable numbers and walking directly into the lion's den. The Plaza Hotel ballroom was a masterclass in opulent deception. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the city's elite. Senators clinked champagne flutes with real estate moguls, while perfectly manicured socialites laughed at jokes they didn't find funny. And moving silently among them, blending seamlessly into the high society background, were Gabriel Rossi's men. Josephine noticed them immediately. While the standard hotel security stood by the doors looking bored, Rossi's private detail operated with tactical awareness. They communicated with subtle nods, their eyes scanning the crowd in continuous, overlapping sectors. They weren't just guarding a party, they were securing a perimeter. "Miss Miller." The voice came from directly behind her, smooth, dark, and chillingly calm. Josephine turned and found herself looking up into the striking, unyielding face of Gabriel Rossi. He was taller than she expected, possessing a predatory grace that made the expensive tuxedo look like battle armor. His eyes, a striking shade of slate gray, locked onto hers, dissecting her in a fraction of a second. "Mr. Rossi," she managed, keeping her chin high. "You look tense, Josephine," he observed, taking 2 glasses of champagne from a passing waiter and offering her one. "I hope Dominic didn't frighten you. He lacks a certain bedside manner." "I'm not frightened, Mr. Rossi. I'm just eager to understand why a financial review required a cocktail dress." She didn't take the glass. Gabriel's lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. "Direct. I like that. The numbers you are looking at, they tell a story. I want to know exactly what chapter you're on." He placed a hand lightly on the small of her back, guiding her away from the crowded dance floor and toward a secluded alcove near the grand terrace doors. The touch sent a jolt of electricity straight down her spine. It wasn't a gentle gesture. It was an act of possession. "I have the preliminary data," Josephine said quietly, instinctively clutching her bag tighter. "There are massive irregularities. Money is being routed out of your legitimate logistics channels through blind trusts. Over $40 million in the last 2 quarters. Gabriel didn't look surprised. In fact, his expression darkened into a look of cold satisfaction. "And did you trace the final destination of these blind trusts?" Josephine hesitated. "The routing algorithms lead back to a holding company called Apex Vanguard. It's a shell corporation. But Mr. Rossi, the authorization signatures on the ghost accounts didn't come from your side. They came from my firm. Someone at Kensington and Lowe is facilitating the theft." "Harrison Ford," Gabriel said softly, naming her boss without a moment's hesitation. Josephine stared at him, stunned. "You knew?" "I've suspected for months," Gabriel murmured, leaning in closer. His scent was an intoxicating mix of bergamot and danger. "But I needed an independent auditor, someone with a flawless record and an inability to lie to find the paper trail. You were chosen very specifically, Josephine, not by Harrison, but by me. I needed you to pull the thread so I could see who was attached to the other end." Panic flared in her chest. "You used me as bait? If Harrison knows I found the accounts—" "He does," Gabriel interrupted, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "And the men he's hired to clean up his mess just breached the East Service entrance." Before Josephine could process his words, the evening shattered. It didn't start with a scream. It started with a deafening crack as the main power grid was violently severed. The grand ballroom plunged into absolute darkness for a terrifying second before the emergency backup generators kicked in, bathing the room in a sickly, strobing yellow light. Then came the gunfire. It was heavy, suppressed, and highly coordinated. The glass of the terrace doors exploded inward. A team of heavily armed operatives in matte black tactical gear breached the room. They weren't aiming randomly. They were moving in a disciplined wedge formation, cutting through the panicked, screaming crowd with terrifying purpose. They were heading straight for the alcove. "Target acquired," a harsh voice barked over the chaos. Josephine stood paralyzed, the breath knocked from her lungs as a laser sight swept across the marble floor toward her chest. She had spent her entire life analyzing risk from the safety of a desk. She had no algorithms for this. A heavy hand clamped onto her waist with bruising force. Gabriel yanked her backward just as a volley of suppressed bullets shredded the velvet curtains where she had been standing. He pulled her flush against his chest, dragging her into the suffocating shadows of a service corridor hidden behind the alcove panels. "Follow my lead," he whispered against her ear, his breath hot against her freezing skin. He didn't wait for her to agree. Gabriel shoved her down the narrow, dimly lit hallway just as the heavy wooden panel behind them splintered from incoming fire. He drew a sleek, matte black sidearm from beneath his jacket in one fluid, practiced motion. He wasn't acting like a panicked civilian. He was moving like a soldier who had just been dropped into familiar territory. "Keep your head down and stay exactly 3 paces behind me," Gabriel commanded, his eyes tracking the shadows of the corridor. "Who are they?" Josephine gasped, struggling to keep up with his long, rapid strides in her heels. "Are they rival mafia?" "Worse," Gabriel said, pausing at a corner and checking the intersection with professional precision. "They're private contractors. Highly paid, completely off the books. Harrison hired them to erase the ledger, and anyone who has seen it." He looked back at her, his gray eyes piercing through the gloom. "That means you, Josephine. You're no longer just the auditor, you're the primary target." A deafening explosion rocked the foundation of the hotel, shaking dust from the ceiling tiles. Gabriel's men were engaging the intruders in the main hall, the muffled sounds of a tactical firefight echoing through the walls. "We need to get to the sub-basement," Gabriel stated, grabbing her wrist. "My extraction team is waiting." "Why are you helping me?" she demanded, adrenaline warring with her natural logic. "I'm a liability to you now. If they want the drive, I should just give it to them." Gabriel stopped abruptly, spinning her around and pinning her against the concrete wall of the corridor. The sudden proximity stole the air from her lungs. "Listen to me very carefully," he growled, his face inches from hers. "You give them that drive, they put a bullet in your head and walk away rich. You stay with me, you survive. You stepped into my world the second you opened that ledger, Josephine. There is no going back to your quiet life." Footsteps echoed from the stairwell ahead of them, heavy, rhythmic, and ascending fast. The contractors had flanked them. Gabriel's jaw tightened. He released her, stepping in front of her to shield her body with his own, raising his weapon. "Stay behind me," he ordered, the cold detachment returning to his voice. "And whatever happens next, do not close your eyes." Gabriel's weapon fired twice, the suppressed shots coughing sharply in the confines of the concrete corridor. The lead contractor, a hulking mass of tactical armor, dropped instantly, his momentum carrying him forward until he crashed heavily at the base of the stairwell. Blood pooled, a dark, expanding mirror on the dusty floor. Gabriel did not hesitate, did not flinch, and did not pause to admire his terrifying handiwork. He simply stepped over the fallen operative, his cold, gray eyes sweeping the upper landing with the mechanical precision of a radar dish. Josephine stared at the lifeless form, her breath hitching in her throat, her analytical mind struggling to process the brutal efficiency of the violence unfolding right in front of her. She had spent her entire professional career quantifying loss in spreadsheets, turning corporate tragedies into manageable data points, but seeing life extinguished so abruptly, so unceremoniously, was a horrific paradigm shift. Gabriel grabbed her wrist again, his grip firm but strangely grounding. "Move, Josephine, now." He hauled her forward, his broad shoulders shielding her as they plunged into the dimly lit, labyrinthine service tunnels beneath the glamorous facade of the Plaza Hotel. The air down here was thick with the scent of ozone, damp concrete, and the metallic tang of old copper pipes. Above them, the muffled, percussive thumps of heavy gunfire continued to vibrate through the reinforced ceiling, a grim reminder that his private security forces were currently fighting a desperate holding action to buy them this narrow window of escape. They navigated through a maze of boiler rooms and maintenance corridors, their footsteps echoing ominously. Josephine's emerald silk gown, previously a symbol of high society elegance, was now torn at the hem and stained with ash, a stark visual representation of her rapid descent into the criminal underworld. She stumbled on a metal grating, a sharp gasp escaping her lips as her ankle twisted painfully. Gabriel caught her instantly, his free arm wrapping securely around her waist to bear her weight. "I've got you," he murmured, the deadly assassin suddenly replaced by a fiercely protective guardian. "We are almost to the extraction point. Just keep moving forward. Who exactly is Harrison working for?" Josephine managed to ask, her voice trembling, but demanding answers. "A simple accounting firm partner does not have the resources to hire an elite paramilitary hit squad to assault a high-profile charity gala in Midtown Manhattan. The financial logistics alone would require a massive slush fund and contacts deep within the black market." She was terrified, yes, but her brain refused to shut down. The numbers were still spinning in her head, seeking a logical equation. "The ghost accounts I found were sophisticated, layered through multiple offshore shell corporations in the Cayman Islands and the Seychelles. This wasn't a smash-and-grab robbery. This was a long-term corporate bleed." Gabriel shot her an impressed sidelong glance as they hurried down another bleak hallway. "You are incredibly sharp, Josephine. Too sharp for your own good, which is exactly why Harrison panicked when you pulled the thread. Harrison is just a middleman, a useful idiot in a tailored suit. The real architect behind this hostile takeover is Vincent Moretti." He spat the name out like a curse, his jaw clenching with barely contained fury. "Moretti controls the docks in New Jersey. He has been trying to absorb the Rossi Syndicate's maritime infrastructure for a decade. He knew he couldn't beat my soldiers in a direct street war, so he decided to bankrupt me from the inside out, using your corrupt boss to siphon the cash necessary to fund this very coup." They reached a heavy, steel-reinforced blast door at the end of the tunnel. Gabriel holstered his weapon and punched a complex 14-digit code into the biometric keypad mounted on the damp wall. The light flashed green, and the massive door hissed open with pneumatic force. Stepping through, they entered a sprawling subterranean parking garage that seemed entirely disconnected from the hotel above. A sleek, matte black armored SUV was idling in the center of the dimly lit space. Standing beside it, holding an automatic rifle with practiced ease, was Dominic. His tuxedo jacket was gone, his crisp white shirt stained with dirt and a streak of blood that didn't appear to be his own, but his rugged face was completely impassive. "Perimeter is temporarily secure, boss," Dominic reported, his gravelly voice echoing in the cavernous garage, "but the local police response is escalating. We have less than 3 minutes before the tactical units establish a hard cordon around the entire block." Gabriel nodded, opening the heavy, bulletproof passenger door for Josephine. "Get in," he commanded softly. "Keep your head down." She climbed into the luxurious leather interior, clutching her small handbag to her chest like a protective shield. The encrypted flash drive inside it felt heavier than a block of solid lead. Gabriel slid into the driver's seat, while Dominic took the rear, his weapon trained out the window. The SUV's powerful engine roared to life, tires screeching aggressively against the concrete as Gabriel slammed the accelerator to the floor. They shot up a hidden ramp, crashing through a camouflaged service gate and merging violently into the chaotic, rain-slicked traffic of the Manhattan night. Sirens wailed in the distance, a chaotic symphony of flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the wet pavement, but Gabriel drove with terrifying, calculated precision, weaving the massive armored vehicle through narrow gaps in the gridlock. Josephine sat frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked at Gabriel, really looked at him. His profile was carved from granite, his expression a mask of absolute, lethal concentration. He was a warlord in a bespoke suit, a king navigating a deadly concrete jungle, and she was completely at his mercy. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper over the roar of the engine. Gabriel did not take his eyes off the road. "We are going to a secure location, entirely off the grid, a place Moretti's mercenaries cannot find us." He shifted gears smoothly, the SUV surging forward. "You have the ledger, Josephine. You hold the key to unmasking every corrupt official, every shell company, and every traitor involved in this conspiracy. Moretti wants you dead because you are the only person alive who can mathematically prove his guilt." He glanced at her, his slate gray eyes softening just a fraction. "You are no longer an auditor, Miss Miller. You are the most valuable asset the Rossi family possesses, and I protect my assets with everything I have." The gravity of his words settled over her like a heavy, suffocating blanket. She had crossed the Rubicon. There was no going back to her quiet apartment, her predictable spreadsheets, or her safe, mundane life. She was strapped into a rolling fortress with a mafia boss, hurtling toward an unknown destination, armed with nothing but a flash drive and her brilliant, analytical mind. The safe house was not a grimy basement or an abandoned warehouse, but a breathtaking multi-million-dollar penthouse overlooking the dark, churning waters of the East River. It was a fortress of glass and steel, completely isolated, accessible only by a private, biometric elevator. As they stepped into the cavernous living room, the city lights below sparkling like scattered diamonds, Josephine finally allowed herself to breathe. The adrenaline crash hit her hard, her knees buckling slightly. Gabriel was there instantly, his strong hands catching her elbows, steadying her. "Sit down," he ordered gently, guiding her toward a plush, velvet sofa. "Dominic will sweep the perimeter and establish secure communications." He walked over to a wet bar, poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal tumbler, and handed it to her. "Drink. It will stop the shaking." Josephine took a sip, the fiery liquid burning a trail down her throat, grounding her scattered senses. She set the glass down and immediately reached into her ruined evening bag, pulling out the small, unassuming flash drive. "We need a secure terminal," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. The professional accountant reasserting control over the terrified civilian. "If Moretti funded tonight's assault using the money he stole from you, the transfer nodes will still be active. The financial architecture of these blind trusts is incredibly complex, but it leaves a digital footprint. If I can get into the master ledger, I can track the money backward, identify the holding accounts, and bleed him dry before the sun comes up." Gabriel stared at her, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his handsome face. He walked over to a minimalist mahogany console, pressing a hidden panel. A massive, state-of-the-art encrypted workstation rose silently from the floor. "The terminal is yours, Josephine. Show me how a forensic accountant fights a war." She sat at the console, her fingers flying across the illuminated keyboard with practiced, blinding speed. The screen flared to life, lines of complex code and financial routing numbers reflecting in her determined eyes. Gabriel stood right behind her, his formidable presence a silent, looming shield, his scent of bergamot and gun smoke enveloping her. For the next 3 hours, the penthouse was utterly silent except for the frantic clicking of the keyboard. Josephine delved deep into the corrupted architecture of the Kensington and Lowe servers, bypassing Harrison's clumsy firewalls, tracing the massive hemorrhage of Rossi funds through a labyrinth of Swiss bank accounts, Panamanian shell companies, and untraceable cryptocurrency wallets. It was a masterpiece of financial deception, but numbers, as Josephine always believed, simply did not lie. They could be hidden, disguised, and manipulated, but they always left a trail for those smart enough to follow it. "Got him," she whispered suddenly, her eyes widening in triumph. She pointed a trembling finger at the glowing monitor. "Moretti didn't just steal your money, Gabriel. He parked it in a vulnerable, centralized hedge fund holding account located in Luxembourg. He is using it as collateral to purchase military-grade weaponry for his private army." Dominic entered the room, his phone pressed tightly to his ear. "Boss, my intelligence network just confirmed it. Moretti is mobilizing his forces. He thinks you are dead, and he is preparing to launch a coordinated strike on our remaining shipping hubs at dawn." Gabriel's expression turned incredibly cold, a mask of pure, unadulterated vengeance. He overplayed his hand. He looked down at Josephine, his eyes burning with intense, dark fire. "Can you freeze the Luxembourg account? Can you lock him out of his own stolen treasury?" Josephine didn't hesitate. Her fingers danced across the keys, initiating a massive, aggressive firewall protocol she had designed for hostile corporate takeovers. "I can do more than freeze it," she said, a fierce, unfamiliar thrill of power surging through her veins. "I can drain it. I can reroute the entire $40 million back into an encrypted, decentralized Rossi trust. By the time Moretti wakes up, his mercenary army won't get paid, his weapons dealers will cancel his contracts, and he will be completely, utterly bankrupt." She executed the final command. hitting the enter key with a definitive strike. A green progress bar flashed across the screen. Transfer complete. Funds secured. She leaned back in the chair, exhaling a long, shaky breath. It's done. The money is back where it belongs. Vincent Moretti is broken. Gabriel slowly placed his hands on the armrests of her chair, leaning down until his face was inches from hers. The tension in the room was suddenly electric, thick, and incredibly intoxicating. You just dismantled a rival crime syndicate with a few keystrokes, Josephine. You are a terrifying, brilliant woman. He reached out, his thumb gently brushing a streak of soot from her cheek, the touch sending a violent shiver down her spine. Harrison Ford will be dealt with by morning. Moretti, without his stolen funds, will be vulnerable. My tactical teams are moving in on his compound right now. The war is over before it even officially began, and it is entirely because of you. He stood up to his full, intimidating height, looking down at her with a mixture of profound respect and undeniable possession. You have a choice to make, Miss Miller. Tomorrow morning, I can provide you with a new identity, a massive, untraceable bank account, and a safe, quiet life anywhere in the world. You will never have to look over your shoulder again. He paused, his voice dropping an octave, rich and deeply persuasive. Or, you can stay. You can work for me. You can be the architect of my empire's financial future. You belong in a world where your brilliance is truly valued, a world where you do not just audit the power, you wield it. Josephine stood up, slowly smoothing the ruined silk of her emerald gown. She looked around the opulent, fortified penthouse, then looked directly into the dangerous, captivating eyes of Gabriel Rossi. She thought about her cramped, lonely office at Kensington and Low. She thought about the pathetic, sweating face of Harrison Ford. And then she thought about the sheer, intoxicating thrill of the last 4 hours. The raw, visceral power of standing beside a king and burning his enemies to the ground. She did not want a quiet, safe life. She wanted the storm. She closed the distance between them, her chin held high, her heart pounding a steady, fearless rhythm. I believe you need a new chief financial officer, Mr. Rossi, she stated, her voice completely steady, devoid of any doubt. And my fees are exceptionally high. Gabriel's lips curved into a dark, devastating smile of pure victory. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against his solid, powerful body, capturing her lips in a fierce, breathless, and intensely demanding kiss. The shadows of the criminal underworld had come to claim her, but as Josephine surrendered to his dominant embrace, she knew she wasn't falling into the darkness. She was learning exactly how to rule it.